Christina Herrick, produce editor for The Packer, and I'm here with another episode of Tip of the Iceberg. Joining me today is Shay Myers, CEO of Oahi Produce. Thanks for joining me, Shay.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Part of the reason I brought you on the podcast was I came across some of your videos that you post on social media, and you do such a great job of explaining farming for those who aren't involved in farming. It's really interesting and refreshing to kind of hear how you explain everything very passionately, but also very informatively. So, I'm really excited about this conversation.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, so I guess since I alluded to the fact that we're talking social media, tell me about that. Like, how did you get involved? I'm sure growing up, you had no, expectation of being in front of a camera and being on social media. But how did you get involved with it, and how did you find yourself in front of the camera representing farming?
Yeah, so I grew up a farm kid,
Yeah.
and I grew up in a farming community. And so when I first left the farming community as a farming kid, I was surprised by how misunderstood farmers were and how misunderstood agriculture was from the very, very beginning. So we're talking, probably the early 2000s. Obviously at that time I wasn't, Facebook didn't even exist yet. But I recognized that it was a challenge. And so that was kind of one of the first things I'm like, wow, we really need to talk about this more. So it was more about having a conversation with someone maybe on a flight or something. And they're like, hey, what do you do? And you're a farmer. And you have that opportunity to interact with someone, on a one-to-one basis. And then, other things happened over the years, other catalysts that made it necessary. We had what we call, at least locally, we call it Snowmageddon. In the winter of 2016, we got nearly 4 feet of snow in an area where we normally get a few inches, and a bunch of our buildings collapsed. And it was suddenly I had a need to be in front of the entirety of our customer base, and I didn't have the time to pick up the phone to talk to everyone. And it was and you needed the visuals too, because what was happening was in like this little teeny microclimate. And so it's not like it was a statewide disaster, or even it'd be a lot like what's happening in Los Angeles right now here with the fires. It's not a statewide issue. It's a major issue for everyone that's experiencing it. But even hearing about it isn't the same as seeing what's happening, or seeing some eyewitness report. And so that's really what started me and telling our story. And then, there were other events along the way that just, changed slightly the way that I told my story, or the way that I shared my message. And it kind of just, evolved over time.
Yeah, so I think one of your social media handles is in your name title there. I feel like you talked about being a farm kid. I feel like we should mention your handles right now.
Yeah, so everywhere I'm at, whether it's Instagram or LinkedIn is my name, Shay Myers, but it's either Shay Farm Kid or Shay Myers, and I'm really kind of on, I wouldn't say every platform. TikTok has got the largest following. But I have presence on Instagram and Facebook and elsewhere at the same time. And then Oahi Produce, frankly, our company page has more followers than I do, believe it or not, on Instagram and Facebook by double or triple.
Yeah, well, great. Yes, I figured, let's tell everyone your Twitter handle or your
my Instagram. Yeah. So Instagram is Shay Farm Kid. Facebook is Shay Farm Kid, TikTok is Shay Farm Kid, and then everything else, and I guess really the only other one would be LinkedIn, is just Shay Myers. Yep.
Well, that makes sense. Same with me. I've got a social media handle that's a little different and fun than, for LinkedIn, it's my name. So let's talk about some of the posts that you've done. What has worked, what hasn't worked, what have you kind of learned in the process of posts?
Yeah, so what works and what doesn't work is really just trial and error. I don't think I've found things that sometimes we'll make a video, and I have help doing videos. Sometimes I've got Rick that helps create some of the content. So if you see me in front of the camera and not holding something, there's somebody helping me. But you just don't know. You really don't know. I mean, I think obviously things that are surprising to the consumer, to the people who are consuming your produce, those are surprising. For example, one of the videos we did years ago was related to onion storages and how onions are stored, and they don't just come straight from the field. Like unlike iceberg lettuce, right? It's coming straight from the field and straight into a bag and into a carton into the store. Onions go into storages, much like apples and potatoes and carrots, and that wasn't something that people expected. So because it was a surprise, it had some virality behind it, and millions of people saw it. Other times, though, you think you have something that's going to be meaningful and really resonate with people, and it's a total flop. So you just never know.
I guess that is true. I mean, it is a fickle medium, but I do feel like at least, and maybe this is because I am involved in the fresh produce industry, so I have a little bit more of a connection and a tie. I always feel like anything that's personal, and kind of has a personal message behind it resonates well with me. Now, I'm like I said, I'm kind of
I agree.
I don't want to say I'm an above average user or consumer of fresh produce content, but it does hit me a little differently than you're right, than probably your average consumer.
Yeah, I mean, you can take a vlogging approach, and certainly just share what you're doing. It doesn't have to be, probably the person who's doing the very best at it at the moment, and who has the time, well, makes the time for it, is Kate,
Yep.
right? So the Apple Girl, Kate does a really good job letting people see inside of what she does on a daily basis. And for those that have the time and the inclination to do that, that's meaningful for people, because you don't get to see what we do as farmers on a daily basis, and you don't get to understand the challenges or the decisions that we have to make, on a weekly basis or on a seasonal basis. And so when people take the time to do that, I think it creates a genuine connection. And while you're on one side of the camera, and so you don't, I guess what I want to say is, you can see when you meet people for the first time in person who have followed you for a while, that there's an instant connection and something meaningful between you and that person, if you're the type of content creator who is sharing about your life and your reality and what you're actually doing. Now, you can get a little caught off guard by how connected or relatable you are to someone that you don't know, but if you just give it a few seconds, quickly you can have a regular conversation, and it's just a great icebreaker.
Yeah. I think one of the motivators for me talking to you was a post that you did about using H2A labor, and why you use it, the importance, what those workers are like, and their contribution to the farm. So talk to me a little bit about the need and want to talk about topics like that, farm life, foreign workers, and the topics that maybe kind of hard to for a grower to discuss, other than just growing great produce.
Yeah, I mean, that one, H2A, is a really easy one because I'm very passionate about it. Again, going back to kind of my upbringing, I grew up in an agriculture community. I grew up going to school with both farmers and farm workers. And so when we talk about those people are the kids that I grew up with. Those are
Yeah.
the people that my kids go to school with today. Those are the people that, might attend college with me. And so um, I have a completely different perspective and perception, especially from those that are removed from ag. I think everyone within ag has
Yeah.
somewhat, definitely a better understanding of reality. But if you get removed from agriculture, you're not forced to face the reality of either the worker or the field or the outdoors or any of the things associated with where your food comes from and what it takes. And so growing up that way, when I hear disparaging words or complaints about field workers or farm workers or Latinos taking people's jobs, I'm like, wait a minute, wait a minute. I'm a farm kid. There's not a whole lot of gringos that I've ever seen in my entire life out working in the fields. Don't talk to me about taking jobs when you don't know what you're talking about, right? Like that's not what they're doing. They're doing a job that you need as well as I need so that we can eat and we can produce. And so it's really, yeah, I have to be careful because I can get too passionate, right? I can offend people too, but that's because I'm taking offense sometimes to what's being said. So I try and take a deep breath and say, okay, let's talk about the nuance. Let's talk about the reality of what the situation is, and that's what's really gotten me to talk about H2A workers, about immigrant workers, about field workers in general, because I know them and I respect them, and I feel like they need a voice.
Yeah, and I think that the post that I remember, you did a really good job too of talking about just the cost. And I think that's obviously that's just one aspect of the whole program and the whole conversation. But if I remember, you talked about just how much investment it is for you to bring these workers. And anybody listening to that would then realize you wouldn't be doing that if you didn't have to. So, and you did such a good job. I do think I can understand where you could get passionate and you could, you would need to take a breath and make sure that you're sending the message in the right way. And, because it is a hotbed topic, unfortunately. But you were so, the way that you spoke about it just again made me go like, I've got to get this guy on the podcast because you were so passionate, but you were also so informed and just so eloquent about the way that you explained it. It was really interesting. And I think that's what ag needs more of in social media. And Kate does a good job too, as you said. I remember one of her with the apples and wax and, just kind of showing exactly what's going on. So I think talking about things and just helping it debunk myths in just a very factual way is exactly what the industry needs. Yeah.
It is absolutely what it needs. And when you go back to the H2A workers and the costs, I mean, I think the problem is the perception is you're using immigrant labor only because it's cheaper, or because you can skirt the system, or because you can cheat them, or because of all of these things. And when you really lay it out there that that's not what it is, that it's actually largely more expensive to use an H-2A visa program than it is to to try and hire domestic workers, people quickly see like, oh, wait, that's not why they're doing it. It's out of necessity. It's required of us to continue to do our jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like we could have an entire other podcast about H2A and labor. And maybe I'll bring you back on to talk more about that in the future.
Yeah.
So kind of thinking about social media and realizing that obviously, as I know, and probably anybody listening to this knows, that farm and fork divide just keeps getting greater and greater. And obviously with social media comes the ability for misinformation to come out. So, it's great that you and other farmers are taking to social media and really talking about what's going on. But, for someone that's listening and tuning in, what kind of advice do you have for getting started? Is there a platform you recommend? Is there like a topic or a way that they should get started? Or is it more like just jump in and figure it out as you go? Or like, what's your advice?
Well, I mean, I always tell people, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. That's the first thing. Don't, and you're gonna feel silly in front of the camera, especially when you're doing this and there's people around you and you're talking at your camera. I mean, you're gonna feel a little awkward sometimes. You're gonna look silly. You're gonna look dumb. But if you're going to consistently share a message, you're gonna have to be willing to do that. So the first hurdle is just to get over your that sense of fear and that uncomfortable nature that comes in putting yourself out there. And then consistency, just being consistent about what you produce and what you say. It doesn't have to be, I'm not saying repeat the same things when I say be consistent, but I mean, that's why for me, I've picked agriculture and I like Ag 101, simple stuff, because there's a lot of opportunities or things that I see that are an opportunity to speak about the basics of agriculture, and I can do them over and over and over again. And I know it, right? I know the subject and I'm passionate about it, so it's easy to do. If I were to be, there's other things that I enjoy doing, but for me to create content behind them, I like flying airplanes, for example, but for me to try and create quality content about flying airplanes would require a lot more research on my part, a lot more time, and therefore I would do it less often. So pick a subject that you're comfortable with, that you are passionate about, and that's easy for you to talk about, and then be consistent when you post it. I would say do TikTok, because that's where I've found the biggest following, but who knows what's going to happen in the next month. So you might wait it out before you do that. But you can pick any platform you want and just be consistent.
And I do think that the nice part about TikTok is, it's short. You don't it's not like you have to produce a 10-minute long video. You're doing quick bites. And as you said, if you're taking a topic, there's plenty of parts of even as you said, storage. I'm sure there's several things that you could talk about within that to create a one package around one topic. So I think that's really interesting, and I think the the challenge and the benefit to social media right now is there's so many different platforms out there. So there's different things that you can do within each platform. If you're trying to make business connections, obviously LinkedIn is a great place for that. If you're trying to inform the masses, TikTok is a great place for that, because you're probably not going to connect as much with, people within your industry as you are with just people interested in learning about farming. And, the platform is huge. But you're right. Uh, we'll see what happens. A lot can happen, but that's but it's the same thing as it has been, since social media started. If a platform isn't popular, another one pops up.
Exactly. Yep.
So something will fill that void and fill it quickly.
Yeah.
So there's plenty of options out there. So I think that's great advice, and I think um the way you approach it is very doable for our audience. Just pick a topic, something, and like you said, farmers are experts in what they're growing and what they're doing. So who better to speak about it?
Right. Well, and if
Than,
we don't, as farmers, speak about what we're doing, we allow other people who are less knowledgeable,
yep,
or have a different agenda to speak about it. Right. So we need to be truthful. We need to be transparent.
yeah.
But if we aren't truthful or transparent, we allow someone else to say whatever they want about us in agriculture, and that is a weak spot for our industry for sure. Is our unwillingness sometimes to just say it how it is and share our story, and by so doing, by default, allow other people to tell our story for us.
That's a great point. And I think it's one that needs to be heard over and over again. Just because, as we've talked about, less people are directly versed in farming or directly related to agriculture. That opportunity for misinformation continues to grow. And then, the unfortunate negative side of all of these platforms is you could be sharing one thing and somebody could be sharing almost the exact opposite thing. So, it is important for ag to be out there and sharing their story and really advocating for the industry, so that the information that's truthful and is really happening is being shared.
Right.
Yeah. So, is there anything else about social media and what you're doing and what other people can do to help use social media as a tool? Is there anything else you want to share?
I think just getting out there and doing it. I mean, I think the more people are willing to tell the story, the better it is for all of us. We you just don't have to look far to see the challenges that we face in agriculture, and we got a little bit of reprieve. Well, I mean, this will sound weird, but thanks to COVID, right? I mean, I think
Yeah.
people were forced to look at the supply chain and where their food was coming from, and realize that everything isn't on the shelf every single day, and it's definitely not on the shelf every single day without people doing something to get it there. But that little boost in transparency or in understanding is quickly fading, and so we need to continue to just make efforts. All of us, anyone that's thinks they're willing to do it or want to do it, should just do it.
Yeah, and I do think that's a good point. Wanting to do it is important. If you're not in it, if you're not genuine, people will sense that, and they'll know, you're just going through the motions, which doesn't help us at all.
That's
So
right.
I think
Exactly. That's why it's important to talk about something that you're passionate about. Because if you're just getting up there and you're trying to read off I see all these things. They're always trying to sell me a teleprompter because I've got followers from there like, you need a teleprompter so you can. I would fail, right? I don't think people would enjoy watching or listening to anything I had to say if I was trying to read off the teleprompter. It just you lose the genuine nature and you lose your voice. And so yeah, talk about something that you can talk about.
yeah. Well, this has been great. I'd love to have you on again to maybe talk a little bit more about labor in the future, since that's definitely something I'm really interested in exploring more and digging into.
Absolutely. I would be glad to be on. I've got plenty of things I can say about immigrant labor in general.
Well, that's great. Yeah, so thank you so much for joining me. I obviously will share all of your social media handles, so anyone that's not following you that's tuning in can connect. But it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you about social media and just to talk to you in general.
Thank you. Thanks. It's great being here.
Absolutely. Well, this is a wrap for this edition of Tip of the Iceberg, brought to you by Produce Market Guide, The Packer, and Farm Journal. Join us again soon for more industry insights. Thanks so much. Bye.